Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. In the wake of McLaren's surprise livery launch, Zak Brown has launched a further attack on the relationship between Red Bull and AlphaTauri, saying that unequivocally, as far as he is concerned at the moment, there is a competitive advantage to be gained either way, which is unfair to the rest of the grid. And in the best interest of the sport, AlphaTauri should either be forced to dissolve or some other potential solution. The other teams, it seems, are somewhat agreed on this based on statements made over the last couple of months. What will the response to this be? Is there actually any collusion potentially going on between these two parties? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, as we dive into this AlphaTauri stuff, the rebrand is almost complete. AlphaTauri is no more. It is going to be Racing Bulls something or other. Now, I'm pretty sure, I will say, 3 to 4 months ago, there were rumours that the big sponsors for this team were going to be Visa and Cashapp. Interesting sponsors because is Cashapp a thing outside of the US? I don't know. You guys let me know in the comment section below because I don't think it's a massive thing over here in the UK. And maybe there's questions on, do you want to pay all the money to reach an audience that you don't necessarily... Well, maybe if you want to reach the audience, fair enough. But anyway, Visa, Cashapp, Racing Bulls. It's just tragic, man, at these naming deals nowadays. It really is a shame, honestly, to see how bad they've got these names over the last several years. And I thought it might be the Visa, Racing Bulls, Cashapp or something. But look, at least the livery is probably going to be interesting enough. The rumor is that it's going to be like blue and silver, but Cashapp, I guess, is kind of like the green thing going on. So I don't really know what they're going to do there, but I'm sure it's going to look interesting. Maybe slightly more like what the Toro Rosso when they had like the nice blue liveries used to look like compared to what I haven't really liked the AlphaTauri liveries for the last couple of years. Big updates as well around the world of F1. Apparently, the Madrid Grand Prix is a go. According to Albert Fabrega, this is a done deal. Deals or details will emerge on the deal next Tuesday. So, look, after all these years driving that stupid chicane at the end of the Barcelona-Catalunya circuit, they finally fix it. We get to race there for like 2 years. Now we go to a street circuit in Madrid. It's just tragic, honestly, as far as I really like the Barcelona track. I might be in the minority of that opinion. And I cannot imagine that a street circuit at Madrid is going to be any better, but unfortunately, this is the reality of F1 we today live in. There's also this that's been confirmed today, all of the start times for the Grand Prix. Now, Las Vegas, I'm pretty sure, was confirmed shortly afterwards that it will be the same time as it was this most recent season, and also sprint weekend timings have not yet been confirmed. There are some interesting ones, though, just to mention here, especially with regard to Australia, because the start time for that is the same, but due to like time zone differences and stuff with when the Grand Prix is with, various daylight savings, I'm pretty sure it will start in the UK at 4 a.m. Last year it was 6. 6 is not ideal, but you can get up for 6 a.m. if you need to. But apparently it's going to start at 4. So, even, for a Formula 1 fanatic like us, 4 a.m. is a pretty early start on a Sunday morning to get up for the Grand Prix. But, that's just one thing to keep an eye on. If you guys are UK or pretty much anywhere, this is going to be relevant depending on how daylight savings work out for you guys. There's also this that was going around. Big time rumor, right? So just take a grain of salt. But Ferrari have been doing a lot of talk about extending the contracts of their drivers. We haven't actually seen pen to paper yet for either Charles Leclerc, which will happen at some point, or certainly for Carlos Sainz. The rumor is that Sainz wants a 2-year deal. Ferrari would prefer a 1-year extension and potentially not at all, with Alex Albon potentially available as well. But there were some rumors going around that Pierre Gasly is not particularly interested in staying around and Alpine if the opportunity arose. And supposedly Ferrari might be interested in Gasly for 2025. So just one to look at there, because there have been rumours that Albon to Ferrari is potentially a thing, but if that doesn't happen, if Albon's still at extended or somebody else goes out and gets him, then Ferrari's backup might be Gasly. And obviously Gasly would take the opportunity if it was presented to him to leave Alpine and go to Ferrari. So, it makes things interesting for Sainz if, there's a couple of other candidates that are actually very plausible to acquire in Gasly and Albon respectively if they want to replace Sainz sooner than they possibly otherwise could. Now, there was some rumours about this from the Spanish media saying that Ferrari is looking to drop Sainz for a loser in F1. I'm sure that there was some translation involved here, but I think they were talking about Alex Albon in this case, because I guess he didn't do so well against Max. So, the media, of course, on either side of this is going to make their opinion known. Also, if you guys want to work for Haas, I'm not sure if you would, good. But people were spotting today there's a job opening for a chief operating officer at Haas. So if you guys want to work with the team, then the opportunity is there. So clearly massive internal restructurings at Haas over the moment. And well, it's not looking so good for the future of their team, I would say. But it's definitely on the up for McLaren, right? They finally seem to be in a place, McLaren, for the first time in many a year where people are confident about McLaren. They're finally delivering at what they said they would deliver several years ago when they're trying to get back to the top and actually seem like a serious team again. It's been a long time since McLaren have felt like a real force in the Formula One landscape, and maybe that's happening again now. 2021, of course, was a good season for them. It was a long time before that they were anywhere near competitive, and, you know, last season, sure, they didn't win a race, but they won a sprint. You know, they had some great performances, outperforming the main team of the Mercedes engines, which they buy, and lots of ambition and potential within its team. I mean, Zak Brown is talking a big game at the moment. To be honest, of all of the teams on the grid right now, the one that's talking the biggest game about the new season is McLaren, in the same way that this time last year, you guys probably remember, Aston Martin were bigging it up all over the shop. They were like, our car's unbelievable, we've made so much progress, like we're going to be killing it this year. And most people were looking at Aston Martin saying, are you sure about that, guys, after what's happened in 22? Like, let's wait to see the AMR23 on track. Turns out they were pretty much on the money, right? And they had a great start to the season. That regressed somewhat, but they came back strong with Alonso in Brazil, and even Stroll in Brazil was at least qualified particularly well. McLaren, they were talking the biggest game. Now, look, last year, Mercedes, they released the W14, or they revealed the W14, and they were doing all the tweets about it saying, oh, wow, the grid's going to be so scared of us, and they flopped big time. So just because they talk a good game doesn't necessarily mean that much, but Zak Brown's talking about the driver lineup they've got. They're talking internally about the massive progress McLaren are making, saying that they're not even finding diminishing returns, which is maybe good and bad, because sure, McLaren might be finding still big progress, and even they said they already have big ideas what they want to do for development in season. So they're really confident, McLaren, in their aero department. But if the ceiling of McLaren's concept is still going up and still hasn't been reached, that's probably also true of the Red Bull. So, you know, it also makes it, because Red Bull are pretty much, you would think, have the perfect concept for this set of regulations within some degree of reason. So if McLaren are still finding gains, that means there's more to gain to catch Red Bull, you would potentially think. So we'll see if that ends up being good or bad. But there's been big talk, no doubt, from McLaren. They've also admitted, and understandably, there is some concern that what if Red Bull turn up with a monster, right? Because the theory seems to be that last year Red Bull could have brought more upgrades to the RB19, but they decided not to, just to save money, and instead, whatever they learned in the wind tunnel, they use those ideas for the RB20. So the theory is that there's a lot more performance to come from Red Bull than we've even realized. Maybe that would be unpleasant for McLaren and others. Would that be a surprise? Maybe not, because I think it's kind of expected that Red Bull are going to deliver big performance with next year's car, probably overly and above what any other team can do. But the big drama really lately with Red Bull has been with regard to their relationship with AlphaTauri, or I'm just going to call it Racing Bulls, I think, from now on, because as of very shortly, that's going to be what it's called based on all the rumours that have gone around. But Zak Brown has been very vocal on this over the last couple of months, and even additionally so over the last day or so since they did their somewhat surprise announcement. Zak Brown has gone in and said, look, with the budget cap, you shouldn't be able to have two teams. The rules need to be revived. I think this is the chief reason why it's a problem now, and it wasn't necessarily a problem before. I think the idea that Red Bull have owned two teams has always been a problem from a pure competitive integrity perspective. At the end of the day, when you've got two teams, one of them is never going to win the title. That's just how it goes. So, you know, and you can say, well, Williams never going to win at the moment, but whatever, right? You know, when you've got two teams, one is a sister team, a B team, that team is never going to win the title. That's never ideal, I wouldn't say. But it's not a new thing that Red Bull own two teams, Toro Rosso, and they've used Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, Racing Bulls for years to either develop drivers, which is a benefit that they do have to offer drivers seats in Formula One. Other teams have to rely on Formula 2 and other series maybe to develop their drivers. Red Bull have a greater luxury in that department. And also they can, you know, use Toro Rosso, for example, to try out the Honda engine to see if it's going to work for the main car, which eventually it did. So lots of benefits to be gained in addition to potential on-track benefits when there's been examples of AlphaTauri drivers, well, fighting, let's say, much more vociferously with a Mercedes driver compared to with a Red Bull driver, for example, but also even off-track benefits. And I think that's the big one now, because as I say, this is not a new thing that Red Bull and AlphaTauri have this relationship, that Red Bull own the two teams or whatever. It's been a thing for a very long time in Formula 1 since pretty much they came into the sport. But nowadays there's a budget cap to consider, so the theory is that, well, if Red Bull and AlphaTauri are very much aligned, is it possible that some spending from AlphaTauri could go towards Red Bull's budget cap? Is there a way to kind of tricky, to make that work from an accounting tricky perspective and not get caught? Quite possibly if the FIA isn't good at their job, which they're quite possibly not based on recent evidence. So I think that's why it's a serious problem now. And also when AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso was initially a thing, it was difficult to fund teams. F1 was not in the financial position it's in today. Even having Red Bull own another team was considered, a good step because they needed to do so. Otherwise, no one else was really going to be able to run and fund that team. Today, that's not the case, right? If AlphaTauri were forcibly sold, someone would buy them, no doubt. There's lots of interest in getting into Formula 1 right now, and there's lots of money in the sport, as there's always been, but lots of potential upside as well. So Zak Brown's been going off on the main stage about this, and this is what he says during the launch. The rumor is behind the scenes that most other teams agree with this, right? As they understandably would. I mean, why would they not want to get rid of a potential competitor that's benefiting massively from the Red Bull program? It's no secret that AlphaTauri, Racing Bulls, are getting increasingly close to Red Bull. They're going to probably next year drive an RB19 within reason. Like, they're going to buy loads of parts from last year's Red Bull. They're going to have lots of crossover. And other teams are like, well, that's a bit unfair. They get to do that. And if you're a team that is looking backwards and forwards, obviously, but, AlphaTauri are expected. AlphaTauri even said they want to finish 5th in next year's championship, which would be better than Aston, better than Alpine on paper after the big four, which I guess would be Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari. That's where AlphaTauri want to be. They want to be mixing up for points every single race and potentially even getting back to the podium, on the podium at least from time to time. So if you're another team, why would you want this to happen? Why would you want another team to benefit massively from using as much as they can buy, which now they're pretty much going to do, from the best team? So Zak Brown says there is lots of talk to be done on where we sit on the regulation side with the AB team co-ownership. I believe it's a serious issue for the fairness of the sport, for the fans. That's why it's pretty much not allowed in any other form of major sport, which is definitely true. I'd like to see us as an industry focus on that before it gets to the level of being where Formula 1 once was, which is very out of balance because people are playing by the rules, but a different set of rules. Going on to say that his worries have increased after AlphaTauri are moving lots of their operations from Faenza to next to the Red Bull team in Milton Keynes. AlphaTauri is, from what I understand, moving to the UK, which will benefit both teams. So this AB team co-ownership, which is a whole other level of an AB team type situation, is a big concern to ours for the health of the sport and for the fairness of the sport. When these team cooperation rules were put in place, the sport was in a different place. We have a huge gap between people like ourselves, had a huge gap, who had huge budgets, and smaller teams. Now everyone is pretty much at the cap, if not actually at the budget cap. So I think everyone is playing with the same size of bat, to use a baseball term, and therefore that's not necessary, but it might give someone an unfair advantage, and that's something we need to tackle with the sport quickly. So that, I think, is the question, right? That under the budget cap, is there any sharing of resources and information between the two teams that could potentially be considered as collusion? Or even if it's not that, and, he's not saying outright that there's any cheating going on, but it just does give some degree of competitive advantage to one of the teams. I don't think it's something that we should have. It's something that maybe was necessary in the past, but in modern day sports, you would never have one ownership group owning two teams in the same league. And if you did, you would have massive calls for, competitive integrity violations and massive potential conflicts of interest that really, I don't think we want to see in Formula 1. I mean, the classic example of, we always talk about it. Every year there's at least a couple of moments when there's some on-track activities that people say, was that to do with Red Bull AlphaTauri's relationship or was it not? Like when Tsunoda was sent out with their, the wheel wasn't attached, whatever it was, in Zandvoort 2022, and probably AlphaTauri just made an absolute howler there. But there were people saying, well, did, they do that to cause the safety car for Max to win the race? I don't think so, but it's possible, theoretically, under what we're discussing. And the most obvious example of this in recent times was Qatar 2021, when Max, I wouldn't say he was necessarily stuck in the field so much, but this is Pierre Gasly deliberately not activating DRS until Max overtakes him, and then activating DRS down the rest of the straight. So, it was quite clear during 2021 that the AlphaTauri drivers were, using their position, sister team for Red Bull, to help Max and Checo where possible. And then when Tsunoda was fighting with Hamilton, they were, far more severe. And sure, you can say, well, Mercedes and Williams have the same thing, but it's not quite the same thing. I don't think Russell would have deliberately not opened the DRS, so of course he was at the Williams at the time, to let Hamilton through. That, of course, a massive uproar, and the relationships there aren't quite the same as with Red Bull AlphaTauri. So what's the potential solution to this, if there is one? The present rumour is that come 2026, that's when the teams are really trying to figure this out. It's unlikely anything is going to change for the next couple of years, but there is a push definitely from Zak Brown among others, and as I say, the majority of teams, if not all, will probably agree with this assessment. Christian Horner might say, oh, you know, get your own second team or whatever, but I don't really think that's a realistic solution for many. So it seems like the teams are going to push for some sort of regulation change, probably come 2026, which will either effectively outlaw the current relationship the Red Bull and Racing Bulls are going to enjoy still for the next couple of years. What that means, whether Racing Bulls will have to be forcibly sold, but I think it's a matter of time until Red Bull will only be allowed to operate one team. It doesn't feel likely that this current status quo can last forever, and there will be especially decent calls for this if AlphaTauri's progress is as ambitious and successful as they're expected to be. There's lots of talk right now that AlphaTauri are going to make big progress. The closeness of the relationship with Red Bull could potentially have big implications. And, well, if they make big steps next year with their new car, I don't think it's just going to be Zak Brown that's talking about this. I think basically every team principal is going to be talking about getting this changed ASAP. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. As I say, this isn't a brand new topic. It's been a thing for years. But there's various reasons in the sport right now. The closeness of the two parties, the budget cap that's making this more of a concern now than it has been previously. And as I say, I think the relevance of this discussion will depend somewhat on how much progress AlphaTauri make next year. Alonso says that Aston Martin are going to make big moves. Everyone's talking a good game, obviously, but AlphaTauri, there is concern, no doubt, among teams such as Aston, such as McLaren, that they could make such a big step that, well, it could potentially affect their competitiveness for the new season. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.